All right, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Trading Bitcoin with your host, Tone Vays. Changing up a little bit, that I am joined by Bitcoin Mechanic, who I think still potentially thinks he's in Canada with that beard.
Everyone, welcome to another
My
episode of Trading.
bad. Dude, that's a serious beard, man. I haven't seen you in like a month or more. That's pretty cool. I can't grow that because like I just get so irritated. I can't.
Oh yeah, man. If I don't have a shower religiously every day, it gets itchy, man. You gotta groom when you have a long beard like this, man.
Yeah. All right, guys. Hey, we're gonna stick with our usual format. I'm gonna review the price of Bitcoin real quick, and then Mechanic and I are just gonna chat because I've been doing these monologues on politics, and I would like someone to just bounce ideas off of me, just someone smart that could maybe call me out on some bullshit or just ask good questions in an interactive sense. All right, let's go to screen share. Those that are only here for the price. Oh, hey, I want to talk to you about the mempool afterwards. But I'm looking at the clock. It is 3:24 p.m. New York time. I'm always on New York time because of the stock market, no matter where I am. And I'm going to try to do this in under 10 minutes. So here we go. The monthly chart, the month is, by the way, tomorrow is I believe tomorrow is the anniversary of the lockdowns, 2 years. I think it was March 20th. That's when my flight was from South Africa. So I think I'm going to be tweeting a lot about COVID tomorrow. So we're still in this ascending triangle, and a triangle looks great. I'm still concerned that we can crash below this moving average. If we don't, this would be the first time in Bitcoin's history that we did not go below the purple moving average, reaching the blue. We've done it each of the prior 3 times. So you can see the first time that happened on a monthly chart was back in September 2014. We touched the purple, went to the blue. We hit the blue again. We broke the purple or touched the purple, then broke it in October 2018. And then once again, we touched the purple in December 2019, broke it in March 2020. And each time we went and hit the blue at least once. This would be the first time this doesn't happen. I am, at the moment, I'm 50-50 on whether this happens or not. But for now, we have not broken the ascending triangle, and this could be a massive breakout sometime late this year. That's the monthly look. The week is slowly coming to an end. Today is already Saturday. Saturday is almost over in about 5 hours. There's only going to be 24 hours left in this candle. That is a very promising candle on a weekly scale. However, I still need to see a new weekly high close, and we are not there yet. On a weekly scale, we need a close about 42.5. We're still not going to break the intra-week high, but getting a new swing high weekly close is a really good starting point for the weekly chart to be super bullish. If next week is a positive week, we're going to get a green star candle on a weekly scale, which is a really good sign and gets us closer to that eventual breakout. Okay. Next. This is my allocation chart. As I've been saying for the last couple of days, I don't want to panic. Now, this candle is about to get to the second half of the candle. Look at the moving averages. The moving averages are actually in parallel. I am still waiting for these moving averages to cross or the end of this candle to be near the current price of the candle. So once again, I will stay patient and I will wait another 8 to 24 hours before making any decisions on this allocation chart. The decision would be to go into cash, getting ready to go massively long upon the break of 44,000. Daily chart. Daily chart is looking like it's consolidating. We are still in between this horizontal channel. As long as we are in this horizontal channel, there's really no large expectation to the upside or the downside. The closer we get to the top of the channel, the more I'm expecting us to break out with a vengeance and go to new all-time high. The closer we get to the bottom of the channel, the more I'm expecting a complete collapse of the price, going down towards the low $20,000 range. Okay, that's it on a daily chart. Now, the daily chart is going to come up on an MRI sell very soon, and it's going to be very, very interesting. I would love to see a rejection at the MRI sell near 44,000, come back and back test the 50-period moving average, and then challenge the $44,000 zone once again. That would be the perfect scenario for a nice breakout buy position. Speaking of MRI sells, this is a pretty bullish sign, actually. Of course, any MRI sell is a short-term bearish sign, but I really like the fact that this MRI sell is taking place at a double top along with the prior MRI sell. This was a call that I had right here. I probably drew this arrow right there, looking for a top at the MRI top. Now, because we went significantly higher, my down arrow was actually accurate. It just started at a lower point. Had the front arrow been drawn higher, the down arrow would have been drawn a little bit higher as well, but I would have still been expecting us to get a little bit closer to the breakout area. However, and there's always a but, I prefer to use the best fit line without breaking any bodies. But the top was technically here. And you can see how we did back test and crossed into the range of the prior candle. In fact, the low was down here, which to me is close enough to these secondary highs. So that was a pretty decent pullback that we had from this high. I'm going to delete these arrows because they're just not necessary anymore. And I really like this MRI sell for more upside. I can see a 1 to 4 candle correction and then a breakout to go higher. That's on the 1 hour chart. What about the 4 hour chart? The 4 hour chart is probably in the vicinity of an MRI sell as well. Oh, it's not. This candle broke the count. Okay, so the 4 hour chart is even more bullish with a green star candle about to break the prior swing high. So all of that looks really, really good. GBTC premium is at least not down in the -30 range. And if the moment we break out, guys, I expect this GBTC premium to evaporate very, very quickly. But we can break out tomorrow. We can also break out next year. No idea when that's going to happen. Hey, guys, if you want to support my work, check out tonevays.com on-demand videos where you can learn how to trade and manage your risk and all the other cool stuff. The MRI indicator is in Tone-Vays Products and Services MRI. And those of you that are into finance, join us in the Dominican Republic at the Financial Summit. It will be an absolutely incredible event. All right, I got 3 more minutes. So let's look at oil. Markets are closed. Today is Saturday. Oil pulled back, going back up. I believe oil will hit $200 a barrel and probably sooner than later. Gold, I believe gold is heading towards $3,000 an ounce, probably sooner than later. I don't really care about silver. The S&P 500, the way to look at the S&P 500 is with a weekly chart. The MRI could not have predicted this any better. What an absolute perfect call on the MRI, right off the MRI support line with an MRI buy. We are back above the middle of the upwards horizontal channel, which started in 2008. Look how perfect this channel is from 2000. Actually, it's not that perfect. Initially, it was just up there. But this is a pretty damn good channel from the 2009 lows. And I believe we are going to break out above the top of this channel. I don't know what's going to cause this. I've mentioned it many times. It would be a combination of flight to safety and inflation. But I'm starting to back away from the flight to safety because the United States, with their sanctions, on Russia and Russian oligarchs, which is another way of saying Russian rich people. We don't call American oligarchs for some reason. They're only Russian oligarchs. Confiscating their wealth in the West is going to make the world be very, very hesitant about hiding their wealth in the West, because the West is very happy to confiscate that wealth, which is why Bitcoin is going to be the great beneficiary of that confiscation. And for more on that, go to unconfiscatable.com and watch the videos from the conference, including the Scammy Awards. Hey, Lex, have you watched the Scammy Awards?
No, I started to yesterday. I can't wait to finish it.
It was great, man. It was really. We wanted to live stream it, but we didn't have the we didn't have the equipment nor the bandwidth to do it. Okay, so the daily S&P is completely correlated with Bitcoin. So let's see what Bitcoin does over the weekend. I would love to see the S&P break out and go higher. With all of this, I mean, look, the S&P going higher is good for Bitcoin. So why wouldn't I want the stock market to go up? I'm not a perpetual bear of the stock market like most gloom and doomers. All right. Lex, any questions on the price of Bitcoin, the price of other assets, before we talk about the mempool for a minute and then talk about life and politics the rest of the hour?
Oh, I've got loads of questions, man. Do you agree with me that the price of Bitcoin will do something along the lines of, at least versus the US dollar, if the US dollar really does hit the fan, so to speak? If shit really hits the fan and the US dollar loses the status it currently has, do you agree that the price of Bitcoin in terms of US dollars would go full gold in the Weimar Republic?
Man, see, that's a tough one, right? Because I don't see that happening to the dollar anytime soon. As much as we want to hate on the dollar, the value of the dollar is only rising because the rest of the world is a bigger basket case. That's the problem.
Can that flip quickly though? Like, I'm not sure how significant it was, but we did have was it India agreed to buy some oil from Russia and they paid rupees, right?
Right. So India can see this. This is the thing, right? And I've been saying this for years and years and years. I never bought the bullshit or that the petrodollar is the reason why the U.S. economy is so strong and why the dollar is so strong. I never bought into the petrodollar narrative. So India can start buying in Chinese yuan. Russia can start buying oil from Saudi Arabia in rubles. But that will only happen if rubles stop devaluing. Like, none of that actually matters, right? Because the price of oil is still, the price discovery of oil is done in the US dollar. And it doesn't matter whether dollars are being bought or not to buy the oil. Like, I just don't see it that way. It never made sense to me. I could be wrong. This is a very debatable topic. But to me, if, let's say, 5-10 years ago, Germany wanted to buy oil from Russia, they're not buying the dollar. They're sending Russia euros. And Russia converts those euros into whatever the hell they like. I mean, it's kind of like it's kind of like Coinbase and BitPay, right? Just because I'm buying in Bitcoin doesn't mean you're getting Bitcoin. You could be getting another currency, right? Like, so this shit is instantly. Like Germany has euros. They want to buy oil from Russia. Russia has rubles. It's like the whole like Ripple thing, right? Like, the US dollar is an unnecessary, useless additional currency where euros are converted into a dollar and then dollars converted into rubles because Russia may want rubles, right? It's like the whole Ripple argument. You need Ripple in the middle of my transaction, right? You can't just convert dollars into the Filipino peso. For some dumb reason, you have to convert it into Ripple, and then you convert Ripple into the Filipino peso, right? That's how I always saw the oil trade going on between countries that have nothing to do with the US. This concept that dollar is gonna, die because oil trade is being done outside of the dollar. never made sense to me. Now the dollar will die because, like, in a different way, because all these countries are going to say screw the dollar publicly. It's the public element, not what's happening behind the computer screen. The public perception that half the world no longer needs the dollar for oil trade will give the world less confidence in the US dollar. And it's confidence in your currency that strengthens your currency, not the actual use of that currency.
I think so. I think the world, I agree with you that maybe the petrodollar thing is somewhat of a distraction. I don't understand the mechanism whereby if it's used as an arbitrary medium of exchange or not a medium of exchange at all, it's like people using stable coins, right? Like they don't have any faith in anything about any of what it is, any of the infrastructure that it sits on, but they don't need to because they use it to move value from A to B. They don't use it to store value, right? So it's like use Bcash. If the guy at the store accepts Bcash but doesn't accept Bitcoin, whatever, I'll buy Bcash and pay you and be done with it. I don't really care. It's the same as the Mexican peso to me, right? Who cares? Like I'm not gonna come back to this thing in 10 years and expect it to be valuable. That's the hard problem.
Exactly. So as more and more countries stop caring about the US dollar, those countries just won't hold US dollars anymore. And other countries will see these countries not caring about the US dollar for their oil trade. And those countries will stop, having this dependence on holding the US dollar. It's about hodling of the US dollar. It's not about using it for transactions. We all understand this in the Bitcoin space, but for some reason, everyone is still thinking that the currency of transactions being the US dollar matters. It doesn't. It's the hodling of the dollars that matters.
God, this is a really good point. Let me rephrase what you just said, because this is a bombshell for me. In Bitcoin, we had to do a bunch of collective learning together and ask really difficult questions about what money is and what it isn't and what's important and what isn't when you're bootstrapping. And basically during the block size wars, we realized mediums of exchange aren't really that important and stores of value are really difficult and actually really important. And one is much more important than the other and one's a lot harder than the other. And that's respective. So we were like, screw having loads of transactions. That doesn't matter because people do loads of transactions in any old currency. They don't care about it. But store of value is a hard problem. So if we can solve that, we don't want to compromise that for the other. So people, in terms of fiat, use the US dollar as a store of value because it's the best fiat there is. And then people are measuring the success of the US dollar in the same mistaken way that Bcashers try to claim supremacy over Bitcoin because it's more useful as a medium of exchange and more liquid and whatever. But that only comes as a function of the fact that it's got utility as a store of value, but it definitely isn't the apex predator for that anymore because Bitcoin exists. So I guess then my next question is, if the US dollar does fall apart, is it really like us Bitcoin maxis have been saying, it was inevitable? It's basically Bitcoin that brought about the demise of it, and all of this geopolitical stuff is just noise.
No, completely the opposite. It's this geopolitical stuff that ruined the dollar. But
then what would be happening if there was no Bitcoin around? Then we really would be switching over to the yuan or something?
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Well, yuan or even the ruble, like it depends how this shapes out. See, people don't realize that while go back to the political stuff, I don't see a revolution in Russia. Like, I'm sorry, I know the West is trying to get Russia to overthrow Putin. I don't see it. But I can certainly see a revolution in the United States between the red states and the blue states, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can see that.
Well, Russia, what do the people have to revolt against? Because most people don't care about whether you're technically a dictatorship or not. They just, that's a high-minded value. It's something that you can on principle oppose, but it doesn't, the standard of the dictator, the values that they have and what they do with their power is actually what people care about, not whether it is technically a dictatorship or not, right?
Right, and people are starting to recognize that based on success of Dubai. There are setbacks, right? Success of Singapore was great, but they just proved how tyrannical they could be during the 2 years of COVID. So like Singapore was bringing this model up and it just crashed it down. But then you have Bukele and El Salvador reversing the the trend of what Singapore accomplished and then ruined in the blink of an eye. And Dubai is kind of in the middle because they went pretty tyrannical very early on with the COVID stuff, and real quick, they're pegged to the dollar. They can't just print money, right? They realized real quick that if they keep this, tyranny up, like their whole society is ruined. So they opened back up real quick. And that's why I spent most of last year in Dubai.
Yeah, and I did a 180 on Dubai, and that was a hard thing for me to do. And I think you can take it if someone has a strong opinion on a topic.
You have to go there. I'm so glad I got you there.
Yeah, well, this is like, you can trust the opinion of someone that very vocally had the opposite opinion previously and has to eat humble pie, right? Because I've been shitting on Dubai forever. Like, I went there years ago. They gave me a really hard time at the airport, Jewish last name. I thought, this is ridiculous. Like, it was just over and over and over again at the airport. And then they did that thing where they search you for cannabis. And, I was like, well, I'm fucked. There's going to be dust of cannabis in all my pockets and shit. And you hear these horror stories about how they'll throw you in jail for like microscopic particles. In the end, nothing happened, but I swore I'd never go back. Then I went back for your conference, and it was the least COVID tyranny I've had to deal with in any circumstance. I literally got from the airplane to the taxi where you picked me up. All I heard was, passport, please, and welcome to Dubai. That was it. That was the only things that were said to me in between. So, you have to wear masks in hotels and stuff, and the taxi drivers will make you wear it. But more interesting than that, though, was just the fact that it opened my mind to the fact that you don't have you have this good guy, bad guy, simplistic thing with, this is a dictatorship or a monarchy versus the West, where we have thriving democracy and freedom. And I'm saying, I think the latter is just an illusion, right? Like, go back to Canada, and I'm like, what is this supposed to be in comparison to Dubai? Is it supposed to be a thriving, free democracy? Those words don't even fit together in the first place, and it's definitely not free. Arguably it's democratic, but it's not free. Canada is not, everyone is still trapped there. I was lucky to get out with my family. And to be honest, I think getting out of Canada was something that shouldn't have happened according to the law of Canada, but we made it out anyway because we got lucky and because we managed to kick up a big enough fuss. And I think the airline was just like, okay, we're going to let these people out. And I don't think they were supposed to. So the fact that it's basically just a prison island, you can't drive into the States unless you're American. It's just like Australia because,
Yeah, speaking of Australia, someone literally messaged me, it's been 2 years. And someone was like, Tone, I'm thinking of escaping Australia. They still can't get out.
Yeah, and they're never gonna renege on all this stuff, man. When are they ever gonna say, there hasn't been enough drama about it. So they're never gonna turn around and say, okay, we're gonna let people fly now, because they don't need to. There's no pressure. Right?
So look, people in the comments are saying the Russian sanctions are hurting the Russian people. Yes, that is true, right? The Russian sanctions are hurting the Russian people. So Russia, from a geopolitical perspective, needs to strike a deal with China real quick in order to replicate the financial infrastructure that was provided to Russia by America. And these sanctions, it's going to be very hard to overthrow Putin. And again, the closer to a dictatorship your country is, the harder it is to overthrow the dictator. Now, Putin is not the kind of dictator that you have in, say, the Middle East or in some other countries, but he's in between, right? It's not a Western-style democracy. It's different. So it's very hard. Same thing in Belarus. It's very hard to overthrow that leader. But those countries, they're not communist countries. Those are capitalist countries. They just have a different political structure that the West seems to have a problem comprehending. And you know what? I actually had a little bit of a problem comprehending it. And sometimes the simplest thing just rings a bell, right? And I don't know if you saw, I played this video. Maybe I'll find it while you're chatting. It was from this Indian guy that was just trying to explain in a neutral way the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And he just simplified the Russian political structure and the Chinese political structure and how they're different versus the US structure. I'll try to find that video and play it. And it's going to be very hard to overthrow Putin. And as long as he's able to replace the financial system that was provided by America with China, Russia is like, it's great for Putin. Because first of all, now he just got rid of American infrastructure that could have been used to negotiate for something. And people that think that confiscating the wealth of these Russian oligarchs, first of all, that is going to go a long way to destroying the US dollar, because the US and the West has just proved that it is unsafe to store your foreign wealth in the West. They should be praising, they should be giving royalties to these Russian oligarchs that had wealth in the West, because they were their best chance of potentially overthrowing Putin with their wealth, which has now been confiscated.
Yeah, so again, though, I'm always trying to say these politicians are not stupid. If they're making things that look like blunders and mistakes, it's not blunders and mistakes, it's controlled demolition at this point. Do you agree?
Yeah,
like
no.
I look at Biden, Harris, and Elizabeth Warren, and I go, this is not a joke. This can't be a joke. This is something else. Like I don't know. I have to believe it's controlled demolition. Like
no,
this is intentional. It must.
I think okay. So I think the controlled demolition takes place one step above them, over at like the World Economic Forum and like guys like George Soros, where they are like backing and putting in the most incompetent politicians possible in order to cause this demolition based on their genius.
Right. So that leads me on to that question I had for you earlier, right? Which is, you've all misanthropy aside, like we're trying to love our fellow human beings and, you know, and respect freedom and all that stuff. And these people in the World Economic Forum obviously don't. But do they have a point? Because we've seen how easily people can be psyoped and misled and just told to support anything they're told to support. And that being the case, it makes them dangerous and unpredictable. So if you're going to treat them like cattle and lead them to think and do your own bidding for you, is that justified? And would you do the same thing if you were chairman of the World Economic Forum? Would you go, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to let everyone be free, knowing that they will just do whatever some despot tells them to do? Like, you've all got to be terrified and lock yourselves in your houses for 2 years. They're all going to do it. They're actually going to do it. So you better come up with some instructions that, you know, at least make the world a predictable and safe place, because who knows who else they're going to follow if you don't do it, right? Like, someone's got to take the wheel. I don't believe this, but at the same time, I haven't heard a convincing debunk of that way of thinking.
You know, that's a good point, and I don't have much to counter that point. So to sum up what Mechanic just said, these people like Klaus Schwab and other intellectual PhDs that have read, you know, what's Karl Marx's book? Oh man, I just like
Das Kapital.
Yeah, thank you. That read Karl Marx way too many times and think they can do a better job. So Lex's point is that, well, these people know that the average person is too stupid, and we can't let the average person like control their own life because they will kill us all. So it's better that we control them versus a different evil dictator that has a different economic model controls them. And it's a good point, because if people are able to be controlled, someone is going to do it, and it might as well be these guys. I just really don't like their views, because their views are so hypocritical and contradictory, right? These people think that the population is way too big, and they want population down to under a billion people, while at the same time, they're trying to save everyone with a vaccine. So these are like the contradictions in my brain that don't compute together. So it's, I really don't like these Marxist people.
I think a more like technical contradiction would be the approach to energy, right? Like absolute annihilation of nuclear power, and at the same time, a complete denial of the reality of needing fossil fuels if you're going to do that. So attack fossil fuels. I mean, this isn't the high ups, but at least from the Biden administration, when someone pointed out the contradiction of saying, when you shut down Russian oil, the infrastructure and the market there, it's supposed to be an economic sanction on Russia. And when you shut down your own pipeline running through North America, that's not a sanction on North America. It's an environmental policy that's supposed to be good for you. So, like, you're doing literally the same thing. You're crippling the Russian economy by screwing up the crude oil trade there, and you're helping the American economy by screwing up the crude oil trade here. It doesn't make a lot of sense. And
yeah,
I think energy is a very good example of the hypocrisy and the inconsistency in their approach to stuff.
I know. So, man, I have this weird thing on energy. I was never a big nuclear energy fan. Okay. And it's hard for me to defend my anti-nuclear energy position, because I know that nuclear energy is clean energy. But at the same time, the tail risk of a nuclear disaster is potentially all human life threatening, right? So, and we're not talking about a single reactor. A single reactor in Ukraine, by the way, could have taken out all of Europe. Like, if you watch the movie Chernobyl, they came really close to making almost all of Europe uninhabitable for decades. And yes, I know they're made way better now and they're way safer now. But I also watched this documentary a little while ago, and I don't know how true it is, but I watched this documentary, what would happen to the planet if all humans disappeared, right? And it was literally like, hey, it's like Thanos does this, only kills everyone. Like, everyone just vanishes. Not half the people, but all the people. And they kind of just rolled the time forward. And obviously this was like a way to heal the planet. But the most interesting part of that documentary said, well, after all humans disappear, the electric grid will fail. And once the electric grid fails, there is an average of a 2-week backup before every nuclear reactor on the planet starts to melt down. And that makes me think of, well, what if there is a major natural disaster or a man-made global EMP disaster that actually manages to take out the electric grid for over 2 weeks? That means all humans die because of the nuclear reactors. This is why I was never a huge fan of nuclear energy, because of that potential risk of ending all life on Earth. Now, I know that green energy, like the renewable energy, it's not up to par. And I know that old school energy is, kind of polluting. So there needs to be this mutual understanding that as we try to get better at renewable energy, we need to just find a way to keep pollution as low as possible from the old school dirty energy. And the best solution is to somehow don't allow companies to patent troll and destroy new clean technology. I know that's a problem in that space. And but there has to be an understanding that humans are not responsible for 99% of the climate change that goes on. But that's a whole different climate change debate. So we're going down a completely different path on the energy side. But the decisions on this ESG initiative and shutting down the nuclear power plants in Germany is insane.
Yeah, that was definitely a mistake. I don't disagree with you, by the way, when it comes to nuclear energy. There's a lot of dismissing and hand waving and sort of mid-wit shit that goes on when it comes to nuclear energy. In theory, it's not that bad. And a lot of the opposition to it is irrational because it's just scary and, nuclear, it's scary stuff. But at the same time, there's an intuition there that's not invalid, right? Accidents happen. And when accidents, the idea of terrorism occurring. If you have a nuclear plant and someone sticks a bomb next to it, like it's a disaster, right?
Well,
like,
right. Well, that's actually the first thing the Russians secured in Ukraine. The first thing they secured was Chernobyl. That's the first. This is why they like.
But that's not an active plant anymore, no?
No, it is.
What? Did they rebuild it or just use the plant?
No. There's 3 or 4 reactors in Chernobyl. Only one imploded back in the 80s. Like it's an active plant.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, that was a lot of drama and a lot of misinformation about that. Yeah. That was supposed to be. Well, I don't know what happened there exactly, but
yeah, no. Chernobyl is still fully active. Well, not fully active. One of them is still under, but the rest of it is still there. There were 3 or 4 reactors. I believe it was 4. The live chat can correct me on this. I mean, I could be wrong, but as far as I know, that's still live. That never went like offline. The other 3 were still like functioning.
But let me ask a complete tangent here. So I saw your map that you drew in your last stream where you're guesstimating.
Right. I gotta make a correction there.
Okay. Well, I think you'd agree that anyone that's being honest with themselves is saying, look, Canada and Australia are awful. If you can get out and don't go back. That's just a given, right? Like anyone with any sense is saying Canada is not the place to be. Australia is not the place to be. The UK actually might be all right. I mean, it sort of could go either way with the UK, but they've made steps in the right direction. America, to me, is gonna be precarious. That's undecided, but it's definitely gonna be turbulent and it could be violent. I want to ask, given that all this seems to be collapsing and a lot of smart people are saying, I'm getting out, like no one is moving from Mexico to Canada, but a lot of people are moving from Canada to Mexico.
Yeah.
And they're the kinds of people that have the ideologies that I click with and I think are being rational. So my question is, what happens to Latin America, particularly given that it seems to be quite, it's getting its toes in the water with Bitcoin, to say the least, or to under-exaggerate, particularly with regard to El Salvador. What do you think happens to Central America specifically, but also South America during all of this upheaval over the next decade?
America is totally fucking screwed, man. Okay, so let me do a quick correction. Someone in my live chat replied, Tone, you don't know shit about Mongolia. They would never join Russia and China. And my only reply to that is, I completely agree. I don't know anything about Mongolia. So I know absolutely nothing. I think I know more about the majority of African countries than I do about Mongolia. It's the one country I literally know nothing about.
I don't know anything about it either. I know those stories about Genghis Khan being like,
yeah, that's about it. Like everything I know about Mongolia is like pre-18th century.
What's the percentage of people directly descended from Genghis Khan? It's like a 1/7 of all people in Asia are like direct descendants of his or something.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then someone asked me, one of my friends from Southeast Asia, from Thailand, you know who you are. He's a South African. We were hanging out in Thailand. He was asking about Southeast Asia, what happens to the Philippines and Thailand and all these countries. And my answer is, I don't know. The bigger question is what happens to Japan, okay? Because Japan is heavily reliant on U.S. support.
I think it's fair to say Japan would be kind of like the Switzerland, or what Switzerland used to be, of Asia. I think they have a lot of strong principles that makes them maintain a degree of independence. Like they do surprise you, like when they said, oh, we can't force people to take vaccinations, it's against fundamental human rights. Like that was like, what? Okay.
So yes, and also Japan is not on good terms with China. They never really were historically.
I think it maintains an independence from this whole bloc myself.
I don't know. I think China, I mean, if the United States is faltering and it can't defend Asia, I think Korea and Japan, they're not going to be able to, if China and Russia align, South Korea and Japan will have a very hard choice to make. They can try and convince China and Russia that they're going to be independent, but they may not believe them. And Russia and China combined will have the military to kind of force Korea and Japan on their side if if both of these countries feel that the US is not up to par to defend Southeast Asia. See, this is the problem. Once US continue to pick this fight with Russia, and if they actually go to a fight with Russia, the entire Southeast Asia will see that the US cannot fight Russia and China at the same time. They will not be able to split their forces.
What do you think the approach would be? Because
from whose side? China, Southeast Asia, or US?
We're talking about a sort of a new kind of imperialism of the kind that Yuri Bezmenov talked about, right? And the tactic he talks about is you don't fire bullets, you infiltrate, you demoralize, and you walk in when it's all ready for you, which explains basically the moral decline of America. And I understand that would be the approach in Taiwan and probably Japan as well, right? Like, you don't go in there militarily. There's no need, right? Do you agree that would be the approach? They would just go in there, and Taiwan would just be de facto China. It wouldn't be a case that they need to act. It's not going to be like Russia is approaching Ukraine. It would just be a subtle, we go in there, we twist some arms, and we get what we want out of the place, and it becomes a vassal state.
Again, it's a tough decision. Oh, also, hey guys, so I was right, but not fully right. So there were 4 reactors in Chernobyl. And the other 3 reactors, like Chernobyl was in 1986, I think. The other 3 reactors remained active until the year 2000, but they were shut down after the year 2000. So currently, Chernobyl is not an active nuclear reactor, but it was for 15 years after the accident. All right, so correction made. But still, Russia secured that area because you can still have a nuclear accident there. There is still radioactive material there.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to Japan. So it's the military, right? Like I see comments saying how independent Japan really is, like someone's like saying Tone doesn't understand our military. No. I understand the U.S. military very well. The U.S. military shows up in a country that can't defend itself, bombs the shit out of it, and then rolls in the ground troops, right? You can't do that with China and Russia. So I understand the U.S. military really well. And the U.S. military has not ever fought a war that wasn't, on the edge of already ending, right? Like U.S. went into World War I at the end, when the enemy was already, down. The U.S. went into World War II at the end, on the second half of it, when the enemy was already, weakened, when they knew who the winner was. The U.S. has, attacked all these countries economically and militarily that couldn't defend themselves. The U.S. has never fought an international war with a country that could defend itself. So, no, I understand the U.S. military. And I also understand that the U.S. military has not actually proven themselves in a real freaking war by themselves when no one else is on the U.S. side, because Europe doesn't have a very big military.
I think their goals have been wars that were unwinnable and perpetual by design anyway, and they stopped even doing those kinds of wars, and they moved to wars on things like drugs and terrorism instead of countries, just to generate revenue, basically. And by being like the war on COVID, for fuck's sake, all of this stuff is just designed to go on forever and move money into the hands of private contractors with a revolving door between them and government agencies. And that's just the setup, right? It's a scam to steal money from taxpayers, basically. It's not, I don't know, it can't really be seen as anything. Even Vietnam was designed to be lost, right? Like, go on as long as possible and lose this thing. I don't think it was ever supposed to be like a righteous war, like against the Nazis, which even that is questionable. I mean, I'm supposed to be asking you the questions. So, yeah, I really want to concentrate on Latin America, man, and to see. Like,
yeah, Latin America is tricky. See, here is the thing, right? If the U.S. ends up fighting, Russia and China, and potentially India and Middle East, then Latin America, it's very unlikely they're going to take the U.S. side. Mexico is going to be the biggest challenge, right? Because they're so close to America. Mexico, by the way, is just like India. Mexico has abstained from, calling out Russia, just like India. They have taken the neutrality side of things.
Is that official, or is that just inferred from silence?
As far as I know, Mexico abstained from deciding winners and losers here, like who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, right? In general, Russia's the bad guy, right? I mean, that's the general assumption. But remember, every country that votes, to kick Russia out of the planet, which I'm still not sure exactly how they're going to do it, but every country that votes to remove Russia from the earth may not be good for that country in the future if Russia comes out victorious here. So this is why countries like India and Mexico, countries with big economies that depend on this globalization and global trade, as far as I know, abstained from demonizing Russia. Yeah, someone's confirming Mexico voted neutral at the UN, just like India did.
That's a good sign, frankly, for Mexico's future. I take that as a positive sign for sure. As with regards to a place for Westerners to move, because I mean, look, we got Europeans and we got North Americans, and these people, they're my culture, right? I want to live near these people, and especially the people that have the sense to get out of Europe before it just completely collapses. The question is, this is the ever-living question here, is just where the fuck do we go? And Central America is such an obvious choice, especially for Bitcoiners. Brazil just banned Telegram, which is a weird move.
It is a really weird move.
Yeah, I don't get that. That sounds like a personal issue or something. Like there was some
sounds like a personal issue. Okay, it also could be the following, right? Like, they kind of banned it, but they didn't really ban it. It's kind of like we banned online piracy. Like, they probably know that anyone can go and download an APK file if they really want to use Telegram. Like, it could be one of those bans that's just not enforceable.
Well, yeah, just anything on the internet is unenforceable. Though, I mean, they've banned it from app stores in Brazil, and they also, that's not the only way you can ban it, right? But I mean, a VPN and an APK and you're done. You can use it, right? So, not effective. So I'm looking at this map.
Right. So,
how much of the world's population are you accounting for there? Because between
majority,
Brazil, between India and China, you got over 3 billion, I believe, at this point. Russia is another 168, I think, 160
million. Yeah, right. I mean, US is about double the population of Russia.
Yeah. Well, by the time everyone's left, I don't know. Like, yeah. No, Americans don't lead. They stand for it, and I respect them for that. But
Russia, I mean, look, the entire continent of Africa is going to stay neutral here. Latin America will mostly stay neutral. It's incredible how the U.S. is now trying to make deals with Venezuela and Iran. Like what the hell is that?
Iran is mind blowing. Like, if Bin Laden was alive, they'd be making a deal with him at the moment. That's how much they hate Russia.
Well, like it's incredible. I don't see why those countries would. I mean, look, I'm not a fan of Venezuela by any means, but why on earth would Venezuela make a deal with the U.S.? They've been economically sanctioning them forever.
Well, I mean, if the price is right, surely.
I mean, I'm sure Russia and China can give them a better deal.
For what, though? Their only export is oil, correct? And what does Russia want oil for?
Well, you want to think about that question for a second?
Just price America out of the market?
Exactly. Not America, Europe. Europe is good. See, the United States doesn't need Russian oil. US is like the biggest oil exporter, right? It's Europe that's screwed, totally screwed. So now the United States, and I explained this in my last video, the problem that I have with the Democrats is that they think about the American people last. It's like a distant third, right? So the United States they're going to send all the money to Ukraine. They're going to send weapons to Ukraine that Russia will probably blow up or, confiscate. Just like they left weapons in Afghanistan. The United States is going to send U.S. oil to Europe if Russia cuts them off, raising the price of gas in the United States because they have to sell oil to Europe. The United States is probably trying to broker deals with Venezuela and Iran to get that energy into Europe, not into America, right? But America has to support Europe. This is where the US is going to put its own people second or third or fourth or fifth and start selling that gas to Europe, that oil to Europe.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at the prices, right? And the most outrageous thing I saw in the UK was a 1,000% increase in the price of natural gas. That's gas to English people, not
right.
gasoline.
So the price of natural gas is not rising, which is interesting.
But it has. Like, if you look at natural gas prices and I confirmed this with my family back home, it was like 960% increase in gas prices. Natural gas. And energy prices that were bad anyway. I've had my eye on them forever because I used to mine Bitcoin back in the UK. And energy is one of those things that people complain about the price of no matter what it is. Like, whatever it is they're paying is too much. And Canadians love to complain about it. And I'm laughing because I used to pay, gas and electricity bills back in England. And it's outrageous. Like, I pay 9 Canadian cents a kilowatt hour. In the UK, it's something like 40 cents per kilowatt hour. So I can't believe anyone in Canada is complaining about it, but they are. But the point is, though, it's just outrageous. Like, you can mine Bitcoin and make a profit anywhere except Europe. In Europe, the energy is just so expensive and then I was looking at these. I haven't looked at these statistics since after the Russia-Ukraine conflict kicked off. So energy is going to become a major factor in Europe. It has to be. And the fact that it was already unsustainably expensive in the first place, like, this was like 2 months ago, I was last checking these stats. So this before all this kicked off. So are you looking at a situation where just looking at energy and nothing else, Europe is fucked? Like, do you even need another factor to go, yeah, Europe is done? Because no one can afford to pay, 130% of their salary towards their electricity bill. Like, and that doesn't even include.
We're going to try and
Sorry.
That doesn't even include, other forms of energy that you need, right? Like, and it's Europe, it's not the tropics, so you need heating, you need all this stuff. I mean, sure, there's public transport, so maybe petrol prices aren't that important, but if you just take energy prices as your utility bills, if you take that as the one factor, how can Europe sustain itself if it's going to cut off Russia and that's the main place? Is it the main place? That's what I'll ask you. Is Europe mainly getting its energy from Russia?
Yes, about 50 to 60%.
Okay, so given that that's the case, and it's obviously trying to cut all that off, even though it hasn't really, it's just making gestures of doing it. But I believe Germany is still importing loads of oil from Russia. And last I checked, they allowed a loophole where they could still pay them via the SWIFT system, even though Russia got kicked out of SWIFT. They said, don't worry, we'll still keep buying energy from you and we'll still keep paying for it in the way we normally pay for it. If that doesn't sustain, how does Europe survive? Because it's already beyond the pale before the Russia conflict. So how the hell do you get any energy into, Norway? Like, I mean,
again, Norway. I don't know about Norway.
Bad example.
Sweden and Finland will be fine. They're neutral, right? Like, Russia. Here's what bothers me, right? Everyone is trying to explain to me how Putin is trying to take over the world, starting with Europe, right? He wants to recreate the Soviet Union. He might have said something in a speech, like someone tweeted at me, no, Putin wants to take over Europe and rebuild the Soviet Union. Here's him explaining it. I look at the date, it was 2004, right? And I'm like, okay, so is that the most recent example you have of Putin saying that the fall of the Soviet Union was, bad and like it weakened Russia, which is true, right? Of course, anytime a country splits up, it weakens it. That's why the United States did not split up in the mid-1800s with the Civil War stayed together. When a country breaks up, obviously it's not as strong. But if the people can't get along, I mean, look at Yugoslavia. It broke up into 4 countries. Czechoslovakia broke up into 2 countries, right? Obviously, it's not as strong together, but if the people inside that country hate each other, obviously it's going to break up. And this is why I think the United States is going to split. The Democrats and Republicans just hate each other too much. And that divide is growing exponentially every single election. So every 2 years, you can see this exponential trend between Democrats and Republicans. So where was I going with this? So Putin said something about how it's disappointing that Russia split up and all this stuff in a speech that took place closer to the Soviet Union's existence than the current, than today, okay? Putin could have taken Georgia in 2008 and I'm glad he didn't. I love Georgia as an independent country. But he didn't. And Putin is now getting older. And it's been, 30 years since Russia collapsed? Russia has not expanded its border other than a little bit into Georgia and a little bit into Ukraine. Russia didn't even do anything about the northern countries, Estonia and Latvia, becoming NATO, maybe because they didn't have the military or the economy to do anything about it back then. If they had, they might have done something about it and prevented that the way right now they're preventing the Ukraine situation. But I don't understand where this logic comes in that Russia is, after Russia takes over Ukraine, they're going to take over other nations. I don't buy it. And Russia from day one has been saying that they want a neutral Ukraine. They want Ukraine to be more like Finland, maybe a little more like Belarus than Finland, but somewhere in between Belarus and Finland. Like Belarus isn't exactly a democracy. I have no idea what Finland is. I don't believe that the European Union's a democracy. Like, I'm sorry. Most of your lawmakers are not elected officials. The only one that is actually elected and has some say in anything is the German chancellor. Like, I know the French chancellor thinks he has some kind of power. He has no power. Okay. So I don't really see Europe as this, bastion of democracy. Like, I'm sorry. I know life in Europe is really, really good now, but let's see what happens 10 to 20 years down the line. I don't see them trending in the right place.
I think based on energy alone, Europe has to be fucked.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, let me play this real quick. I know I played it once before, and it's just a good summary to explain democracy versus what's in Russia and China. I don't know if you've seen this mechanic, but it's just really good. Let me know how the audio is. An audience, let us know how the audio is.
Neutral about it. And that's how everything will be back to normal. In the end, I just want to quickly add a few more points. Do you remember when did the communist ideology take over the Soviet Union? It was in 1917. The 10 years from 1917 to 1927, the Russian Empire saw a radical transformation into a socialist state. And then in 1922, the Soviet Union started. So from 1917 to 1922, it was Soviet Russia. And after 1922 till 1991, it was the Soviet Union. And before 1917, it was the Russian Empire. And Nicholas II was the last emperor of the Russian Empire, which had a massive extension across Eurasia since 1721. So basically in 1917, there was a Russian civil war where the Bolsheviks took control. Who were the Bolsheviks? They were far leftist Marxist followers, and their founder was Vladimir Lenin. Anyhow, I'm not going to make this a history lesson. Perhaps I'll make a separate video on the history of the Soviet Union. Anyways, the point that I'm trying to make is that it was in 1917 when communists gained control over Soviet Russia. And their aim was to destroy capitalism and create a socialist society. The thing about communism is that they don't believe in culture, religion, or in the idea of the nation. So naturally, Lenin, Stalin, then Nikita Khrushchev, Boris Yeltsin, all of them destroyed the Russian culture, the nationalist sentiments, and did not do anything to revive it. And then in 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, 15 republics, which together formed the Soviet Union, all got separated. The Western countries started preaching to the world that they have completely destroyed the Soviet Union. they have created a new history. The end of the Cold War was seen as a victory of democracy over communism. And that is where the world started thinking communism is associated with dictatorship. Actually, that is correct, but you also have to understand that at the ground level, communist ideology takes birth from radicalization. At first, you need a breeding ground. After that, you need to charge the public, making people oppose some ideas. It could be against the government, culture, religion, and then emerge as a sustainable and a viable political option for those radicalized people. So the leader is not the problem. The ideology is the problem. That is why communist ideology does not care about territorial boundaries. Two groups of people living in a separate country can have similar views if they are communists. That is why you will see the same ideology in worker unions, employee unions, railway unions. Wherever there is union, you will get hints of communist ideology. Always remember, communists have always participated in charging people. They have an anti-establishment mindset. They will tell you things like you are poor because that person is rich. They will talk in such a sweet manner and convincing manner that you will not even realize when you got radicalized. That is how they charge people. So communism is a mindset. So after 1991, the Western powers started preaching to the world that they have destroyed the Soviet Union. They have created a new history. They created a narrative. End of Cold War is seen as a victory of democracy over communism. And that is where the world started thinking communism is associated with dictatorship. But what happened was by 1991, communism was out of Russia. As I said, communism is an ideology. It is a mindset. So it left Russia in 1991 after destroying 70 years of Russian culture. But then it moved deep into the Western society and it destroyed their culture, values, everything. That is why you will see that today in the United States, Canada, and European countries, there's a huge identity crisis. All of the material progress, their per capita GDP, their democracy, prosperity is of no use. People are neck deep in consumerism. They have gone woke. They don't even respect their elders. All they want is more rights. There is no culture. There are no values. There are no ethics, no feeling of nationalism. Unfortunately, the same Western lifestyle is slowly spreading in India. Anyhow, on the other hand, after 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, Boris Yeltsin became the president. Communists have a symbol, if you remember, hammer and sickle. On December 25th, 1991, the communist flag was lowered for the last time over the Kremlin, thereafter replaced by the Russian tricolor. That means Boris Yeltsin became the first president of the Russian state. He was the president till 1999. Even he did not do anything to revive the old Russian culture, the religious values, and the nationalist sentiment. And if you remember, in 1999, he handed over the charge to Vladimir Putin. And since then, he was either the prime minister or the president. So you can say Vladimir Putin is the first leader in Russia to have revived the old Russian culture, religious values, and national sentiments. And that is how the Western media tries to show Vladimir Putin and Russia as a villain. The Democrats in the United States are actually the communist mindsets. And you can also see that today, the United States has charged Ukraine so much that it has to fight alone with Russia. And what is the United States doing? It is asking the world to come together. And on the other hand, Russia is saying, no one will interfere in this fight. Stay out of it. So Russia is actually fighting for its motherland, for its territory, and for also its own people who live in Ukraine. Honestly, the Western power had to just stay out of this. Ukraine got carried away in sweet talks of the Western countries. Unfortunately, today it is in trouble. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you for watching it.
All right. So, can you hear me? Can I hear you? Okay. So, unfortunately, this was not what I actually wanted to show, but it's also really good, so I didn't stop it. Have you heard that before?
No, I've never heard that before. Obviously I agree with a lot of it, but what were you? I don't know. Do you need comment on that? I got a lot of things.
I would love your comment on that. While I hold on, give me 1 second. I gotta mute this once I play it. China. Okay, so I think it might have been this. Okay.
I'm still trying to reconcile this.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm still trying to reconcile this notion of, like on a personal level, I don't want people treating me like I'm a farm animal. But on the other hand, I know that the masses are going to get treated that way regardless. So do we need to push these cultural values on them that work? This is why it's like you all need this kind of religion. You all need this mindless patriotism. Because if you don't have it, something else is going to happen, and that's going to be much worse. It's basically always going to be Marxist ideology in some form or fashion, because people in power want more power, and the way they make you have more power is by making you hate people that they promise to neutralize for you. So it's an inevitable thing, and it's socialism is, you start with no government, you get a bit of government, and then you end up socialist until everything collapses, and then you restart, right? So I guess my comment is, no, I don't know. I need to give me a sec, and then let's play this video.
All right, let me play this one. I think this is where he explains the different political systems between Russia, China, and the West. I think this is what I really wanted to play. I hope this is the section.
Simple and straightforward.
Hold on.
If you look at both Russian narrative, which is to undermine United States' credibility as a protector of the world and its allies. See, it is very simple and straightforward. If you look at both Russia and China, in today's time, these both countries are actually capitalist countries. However, it is also a complex question whether Russia and China are truly capitalist countries. So, Russia and China are capitalist economies. But if you look at the Russian and Chinese political models, they are not an example of democratic governance. I don't have the right word because words like autocracy, dictatorship are not right. If you look at the leadership of Russia and China, they are not a product of nepotism. They have proven themselves and have been placed wherever they are based on their performance. Although if you look at it from the outside, China's one-party system or Russia's political party, United Russia, looks authoritative. But inside these political parties, people have to prove themselves, right? Only then they will be promoted. In other words, meritocracy is there, but it is not like the Western democracy. So if you see, there is actually an invisible fight, or you can say the war of narrative, as to whose governing style is the best. Western American style democracy versus Russia and China's own model of governance. Now, let's not take any side and be absolutely honest to ourselves. Forget about Russia and China's model of governance. If you see the Western American style democracy, it has dominated for a long time. And frankly, today in the 21st century, it is also causing massive chaos and dysfunction. Too much democracy is actually destroying the foundation of almost everything in our society. You cannot make policies on important issues if you have too much democracy. Because today, no one can convince anyone, even if you have facts. Everyone has become an activist. If you see, many of the problems that we see in our societies these days have been created by people who care more. You will hear people saying, I'm more aware of the science. I have read the research. I care about the environment. I care about poor people more than you, etc., etc. Too much democracy has actually led to the decline of common identity. That's what leads to an identity crisis. Europe is facing it. America, Canada is facing it. If we don't have a common identity, then we will be picked apart one by one. And that is how civilization is destroyed. And if you see, that is what the big technology companies are doing with artificial intelligence, targeting individual audiences, manufacturing perception for them. I'm not saying democracy is bad, but too much is not good. Too much of anything is not good. So anyhow, this Russia-Ukraine conflict can actually turn out to be a turning point in building a new world order. And China's interest is to succeed at weakening the global appeal of democratic states, institutions, and norms, so that it can create a space for flaunting the strengths of its own governance model as an alternative. I hope you found this video informative. Thank you for watching it.
All right, so this was the one I wanted to show.
Right. So I'm no fan of democracy, but at the same time, I think, not to be too sort of Russell Brandy about the whole thing, but I think it's a cycle. It's like saying, is death good or bad? Is it avoidable? It's not. It's going to happen. So countries and empires are processes, and they come to an end, and it's not pretty when they do, but you can't extend them forever. All you can do is do what America did, which is start with the best principles possible and try and do everything you can to stave off the inevitable acquiescing to the evils of democracy. Because eventually, no matter how much you try and limit the government with your initial constitution and you make it difficult for these principles to be eroded, eventually democracy will chip away at it. Every shooting there is, whether it's a false flag or real, they're going to come for the gun rights. They're going to be big blue check marks on Twitter saying, we need more gun rights. We need more gun rights. We need the ability to sue gun manufacturers, blah, blah, blah. Eventually, they will get rid of your Second Amendment, or they will make it.
Oh, you mean less gun rights, not more.
Sorry, more gun legislation, restriction, all that stuff. Well, but my point is that even if you have the First Amendment, the right to free speech, but when all your communication is done via third parties and they censor everyone to death, then you don't have free speech. Yeah, you can say anything to anyone, but when's the last time you had a face-to-face conversation, particularly during the madness of the last 2 years? So I think trying to artificially sustain it in facing the ire of a democracy that is just completely morally bankrupt, you just need to accept that it's over. I think on a pragmatic level, you already said it during this stream, America's fucked. It's over. And there's nothing you can really do to artificially sustain it, right? You just want to start another country. But I don't think you can ever have the illusion that we can start another America with those great principles, with a great constitution that's never going to fail.
Well, unfortunately, there isn't another chunk of land that hasn't been discovered yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can't start another one. But this is why I still have hope for the American Constitution if a piece of America breaks off with the right views and values, right? So it can't be a chunk of America that's too big, and it also can't be a chunk of America that's too small. So it's got to be something like from Texas to Florida up until, the Mason-Dixon line, like halfway up the country. So I think I tweeted that out, right? So if that part manages to break off, and actually, the U.S. Constitution is not bad. It's actually pretty damn good. I mean, some of the amendments are not needed anymore, like slavery isn't coming back, right? So you can probably remove that one. So there's a couple of others, right? Like certain
Someone's
things. Someone's
going to take that out of context, bro.
Right, I know. So, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, of course.
So certain, like for example, there is an amendment to ban alcohol, and then there's an amendment to bring it back, right? Like you can remove both of them at this point, right? If you were to rewrite the Constitution,
you can get rid of the technical debt, sure.
Yeah. So a lot of them could be removed, but the U.S. Constitution is not bad. The problem is, the U.S. government is supposed to enforce the U.S. Constitution, not spend the last 200 years destroying it, right? Well, that's the problem.
The point of the Constitution is to limit the power of the U.S. government. And so it's hardly realistic to expect them to become the enforcers of their own self-discipline. It's not going to happen. And they will encourage people democratically to push them further and further away from the values of the Republican values, really. I mean, it's just inevitable and tragic, but I just see it like death. You're gonna grow old and die. Like that's what happened to America. It's like all these things will eat away.
Speaking of growing old and dying, like none of these evil leaders are going into their 95th year, and none of them seem to be dying of old age, which is a whole other conspiracy theory we can go down the rabbit hole of. But yeah, let's not go there.
Okay. All right. Well.
I'll save it for my audience to ponder. Okay, hey, I want to answer your question from earlier, right? Like you asked me about the democracy. So, and people are not going to be happy about this. Basically, I don't have a problem with people voting on stuff. I don't even have a problem with people voting on elected officials that will kind of speak on your behalf. But voting needs to be completely open. It needs to be completely fair. And I actually don't mind having some kind of a requirement to vote other than legal age, right? I really don't mind having some kind of educational proficiency, or I know IQ testing coming back. And hey, I may not score high enough to be eligible to vote, right? And I'm perfectly okay with that. But there needs to be, and it also goes for other things, right? Like people that know nothing about a subject shouldn't be voting on that subject, right? So I really, I don't know how this could be achieved, but for example, I don't believe in random juries either. You're supposed to be able to get a jury trial. That's in the Constitution, which is shredded, right? Because they arrest so many people in the US, you never get a jury trial, but you're supposed to always get a jury trial. So for starters, there need to be less laws to get you arrested. once you are accused of a crime, you need to be able to always get a jury trial. I don't like this idea of taking people out of work and like all the smart ones are going to get off that jury anyway, and your fate is determined by people that weren't smart enough to get off the jury. So like these kinds of things need to be fixed. Perhaps being a juror is actually a profession of some kind, like that is your job. It's good for those that go unemployed and you sign a contract with the judicial system that, hey, for the next 6 months while I'm looking for a job, I will serve as a juror, and you randomly get assigned to these cases. Again, after passing some proficiency exams that you are, qualified and smart enough, like in another job, to take on that job, and your job is to be a juror. So there's, lots of things that could be fixed. Certainly term limits for senators and congressmen. Perhaps they could, run, like, for example, you have a term limit on being a senator, but after that term limit ends, you can run for Congress because now at least you're switching and you're running, against someone that also has some kind of stature. So maybe you can do that, maybe extend it a little bit. I want to give good politicians a chance to come back now, but at the same time, not create, a Nancy Pelosi. So which is incredible how she keeps getting reelected. How is this possible?
I don't know. What is she's a senator, right? She's Speaker of the House.
No, she's a congressman. She's a House. Yeah. Senators are, there's only 50 senators. She's one of the 430 of them, but she's the oldest one that's been there longest. So she's actually second in line for president. If something happens to Biden and Kamala, Nancy Pelosi is US president.
I don't know. A lot of these things are sort of like, in theory, good ideas, but it's just, how are you ever going to get these things? How are you ever going to maintain them? I have so much less faith than average people that good ideas are even worth discussing, because implementing them and sustaining them is just impossible. Like, I don't know how America did it, but it did it for a long time and it did a good job, but it's failed now, in my opinion. So these great ideas, like, how would you ever implement them? How would you ever get the support? How would you ever stop
that's the thing, man. Like the only way it happens is if America breaks up. And look, American values from 100 years ago, they're good. There's lots of good in that US Constitution. There's a reason why the United States has been the world superpower. It's not because of the US military, and it's not because of the US dollar. It's because of those American values. That's why my family fled to the United States. But those values are being completely destroyed by every single Democrat and the majority of Republicans. Guys, I'm not like all that Republican, right? I think half of Republicans are horrible human beings that only want to start wars, and they don't care about your freedom either. But at least it's not all Republicans, but it is all Democrats. Like maybe there's two between the House and the Senate in the Democrat world that aren't communists, basically. Maybe there's two, maybe there's five, but that's where it ends. On the Republican side, at least there's half.
Yeah, I agree. You're not going to get Ron Paul as a Democrat. That's not going to happen. But Ron Paul isn't representative of most Republicans, but he's still, if you're going to get someone like Ron Paul, they're going to be a Republican.
Right, exactly. Again, this is why Trump ran as a Republican. He's not really a Republican. He's a complete independent. He's not a Republican, but he was never going to run as a Democrat, right? So your only shot is a Republican, but then you get Bush Sr. and Bush Jr., or Cheney, or like a Mitt Romney, who is today's a Democrat and tomorrow's a Republican, and the day after he's a Democrat again, right? I mean, these people have no values. These people are, of the communist mindset. And it's half the Republicans, but 99% of the Democrats.
So let me ask you, like, on a personal level, are you half Ukrainian, half Russian?
Yeah, but I'm half Ukrainian, half Russian by birth. But I was born in what is currently Russia. And I am more like ethnically Russian than I am Ukrainian, because I've never been to Ukraine until like 5-6 years ago, right? But when I grew up in my first 10 years of my life, it was Russia in the Moscow vicinity, been to Moscow a few times. And my grandma is actually buried in Riga, Latvia. So whenever I was going to the Honey Badger event in Riga, Latvia, I would, go to the cemetery, visit the grave, also pay the person in cash that takes care of that grave. So that's what I was doing when I was in Latvia. So I spent, in the summertime, because Latvia is freaking cold. It's like up in the north. So in the summertime, I would be spending time with my grandparents that were in Latvia. Eventually, my grandfather came to America as well, a few, like 5-6 years after I did with my parents. But yeah, so I identify more as Russian than Ukrainian, even though one of my parents is Ukrainian, one of my parents is Russian. But in my travels, since I started going to the Russian-speaking region, I would way rather spend my time in Ukraine than Russia. And I was planning to spend the entire summer of 2020 in Ukraine. I really like spending time in Ukraine. And I know all my Ukrainian friends hate my guts right now over my views. But at the same time, I'm one of the few people that's telling them the truth, telling them my honest opinion, regardless of what they think of me. And all of this could have been avoided. And all of this could have stopped a few days after, Russia first fired the shot. And it can be stopped, could have been stopped yesterday, and it can be stopped tomorrow. And no one is interested in stopping it. And to me, it feels like the world just wants more Ukrainians to die.
Yeah, well, either willingly or unwillingly, and they're willing to, I'm not going to get started on that, but I'm going to say, how soon do you think this conflict resolves? Because at the end of the day, even if Putin wants to do this whole thing as, in the most peaceful, non-destructive manner possible, at some point it's decisive. It isn't yet, but I hear that already in the west of Ukraine at this point.
It's really bad. And oh man, I need to write all this up. So I actually only have another 15 minutes. Look, I kind of do this in my Telegram groups and I type it out. I never really spelled it out on this channel. I still have not listened to Putin's pre-invasion speech, but I did listen to his post-invasion speech. And he didn't even say all the reasons as to why he invaded. No one wants to discuss why he invaded. So, and the main reason that people are clinging to, and that is the Russian narrative as to why Russians are there, is to denazify Ukraine. While I initially blew that off as that's not a big deal. I didn't think, I knew there was a Nazi element in Ukraine, but I didn't think it was of any significance. I have flipped my mind changed my mind a little bit on that. And by the way, if you start Googling, even on YouTube, the Nazi element in Ukraine, you get hundreds, if not thousands of videos in the last 10 years, videos going back 10 years, talking about the whole Nazi element in Ukraine. This isn't a reason. It's all the Western media was constantly reporting on a Nazi element in Ukraine, and suddenly it's like it never happened. Once Russia invaded, it's wait, no, there was no Nazis in Ukraine. Wait, BBC has a 20-part series on this. Every single year, they did a documentary on it as it grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger up until last year. And then, wait, we didn't do anything. We never covered that. It's really insane. But anyway, so that's not the main reason, right? But it's a good excuse. It's a good excuse. So when the Russian military, occupies a town, I've seen the videos. I don't know if they're propaganda or not, but where the Russian military is telling the people, hey, just go back to your homes. We're not here to kill you. But our mission is to denazify Ukraine. It's a really good narrative to convince the soldiers, right? Because it's easier to convince the soldiers that you're there to denazify Ukraine because Russians hate the Nazis. I mean, that was the whole World War II. It was Russia versus the Nazis. versus the real reason why they're there, and that is US doesn't want NATO, right? So for me, reason number one why the Russians are there is the NATO aspect of it. That's the main reason. The second most important reason is the Donbass region, where there's been fighting between the Russians and the Ukrainians in East Ukraine, pretty much since 2014, since the overthrow of the Russian-leaning president. The third reason, probably the most important reason why they're there, is to third and fourth, the kind of a toss-up, is the Ukrainian military, while the Nazi side of Ukraine is a very small minority of maybe 1 to 2% of the vote if their party was for election. They occupy high positions in the Ukrainian military, and that's the problem. Even though you are a small minority, you are the majority of the Ukrainian military.
One thing I want to throw in there about the Nazi presence is I no longer believe that there are such things as truly organic movements. So if there is and we know there is a strong Nazi element in Ukrainian culture, if there are Nazi organizations, those things are not entirely organic. I'm going to say that I'm going to give them the credit of saying they are grassroots, they are organic, but that doesn't mean they aren't being fostered and maintained by some outside force. And as far as I can tell, that has been Western influence, because it's been tactically useful for them to serve as an opposition. They can prop up and cause general chaos in Ukraine. So this is seriously damning an indictment of the political influence of people like Biden and Biden's son and all these people that have been hanging around in Ukraine. They've been interacting with and propping up these groups, as far as I can tell, and they've been doing it utterly shamelessly.
That's a whole side angle, right? I mean, that's but I got to address a comment, right? So the comment is as follows from the live chat. Hold on one second, and it's a really important comment. And it's Beskuru, right? Yeah, scary Ukrainian Nazis led by a Jewish president. No, he's not leading them. The problem is this is all my opinion, guys. It's my opinion. The reason why Zelensky cannot sign the deal with Russia to save Ukrainian lives is because he will probably be eliminated by that military, right? He is not in control of that military. If anything, those military leaders are telling him what to do. And that is why it all fell apart. See, the people elected Zelensky. And one of Zelensky's, talking points during the election is that he will broker peace between Ukraine and Russia. Well, guess what? No one respects Zelensky as president in their military, because a former comedian who then replaced politicians with his comedian and actor friends. So the military in Ukraine, I believe, has zero respect for Zelensky, the way the United States has zero respect for Joe Biden, because they know Joe Biden belongs in a nursing home.
Dude,
okay?
I agree completely when it comes to Zelensky. The one of the most telling things about the propaganda that's been released regarding Zelensky is all of these appeals to how all this false creation of him as some sort of sex symbol. Like, have you seen all these posts of people saying like, oh, if I came home and Zelensky was fucking my girl, I'd make him a cup of coffee, and like just all of these things where I've seen people all blue check marks saying like, every guy has to deal with the fact that his girlfriend now has a crush on Zelensky and there's nothing they can do about it. All of this stuff, the manufacture of him as some sort of sex symbol, like, who is that? That is the ultimate level of pimping. As far as I can tell, the real political heavyweights are using this guy like an absolute puppet or a prostitute in this case. He is not respected at all. He is being used more than any puppet I've ever seen being used, because otherwise he wouldn't be in that situation. And so that's why it's an irrelevance whether he's Jewish or not, because he is just a puppet.
Agreed. And also, continuing the discussion with the same person who says Zelensky united all Ukrainians now. ask any of your Ukrainian friends. Yes, I agree. Zelensky did unite all Ukrainians by getting a bunch of them killed and 2 million of running away into Europe. You united Ukrainians by having Russia invade and start shooting, right? That's not a good way to unite your country, right? Starting it's so hard to who started the fight, right? The guy who's in your face or the guy who threw the first punch?
No, Putin united Ukrainians. That's what he did. He made them all hate him.
Right. Zelensky did, well, in a way, Zelensky united Ukrainians by provoking Putin to invade. That's not a way to unite Ukrainians. I'm sorry. And that's how you get Ukrainians killed.
That is not
they can, and that's what bothers me so much. There's also this. Hold on, I want to play one more quick video. I don't know if you shoot. Hold on, give me 1 second. There were other good questions. This is in my. I have here. This one. The translation is accurate. Right here, it was a tweet. So Lex, I don't know if you've heard this, so it'll be good for you to hear. And this frustrated me to no end. I don't know if I tweeted it out or not.
Do you want to be sharing screen?
Oh yeah, good. Because my private messages came up. I thought I was sharing screen. All right, so just read the translation. I know you're not going to be able to understand them. Let me play it.
То есть, если Украина получает выдачу в НАТО, то тогда мы можем говорить о каких-то сроках прекращения войны.
Нет, ни о каких сроках прекращения войны мы не будем говорить. Наоборот, это, скорее всего, подтолкнет крупная военная операция России против Украины. Потому что они должны нас будут просадить в инфраструктурном отношении и превратить здесь все в разваленную территорию для того, чтобы нас неохотно.
То есть Россия сможет пойти на прямую конфронтацию с НАТО?
Конечно, Россия не НАТО. Мы не успеем. Они должны это сделать до того, как мы вступим в НАТО, чтобы мы не были интересны НАТО. Перестали быть интересны, как разваленная территория. С вероятностью 99,9% наша цена за вступление в НАТО – это большая война с Россией. А если мы не вступим в НАТО, это поглощение России в течение 10-12 лет. Вот и вся вилка, в которой мы находимся. А теперь давайте выбирайте Зеленского.
Подождите, теперь если поставить чашу на весах, а что лучше в таком случае?
Конечно, крупная война с Россией и переход в НАТО по результатам победы в России.
Что такое может быть крупная война с Россией?
Это воздушная операция наступательная, вторжение российских армий, 4, которые они создали на наших границах, там осада Киева, попытка окружить войска, которые в АТО находятся, операция объединенных сил, прорыв через Крымский перешейк, выход на Новокаховское водохранилище, чтобы воду в Крым дать, наступление с территории Беларуси, там, создание новых народных республик, диверсии, удары по объектам критической инфраструктуры и так далее, воздушный десант. Вот что такое полноценная война. И вероятность ее 99%.
Когда?
После 21-22 самые критические, 20-22 самые критические.
Right. So, did you read that?
I already saw that.
We saw it. Okay. So basically, this is someone from the Zelensky camp promoting Zelensky to be president, saying exactly what is going to happen by 2022. A full-blown war with Russia with 99.9% certainty if we try to join NATO. And the reporter was like, well, wait a minute. Why do you then want to join NATO? And he says, well, we'd rather have a full-blown war with Russia now than be taken over by Russia in 10 to 12 years from now. How does this make any kind of logical sense?
Interesting.
So he's like, vote for Zelensky because we will go to war with Russia sooner than this fictional thing of what will happen in 10 to 20 years. Like, who knows what's going to happen in 10 to 20 years?
I guess the idea is then to provoke such a thing, to set up a World War I kind of scenario where the West is dragged in to fight with Ukraine. And there's obviously been a lot of deals made and promises that would lead them to think that was the right course of action, or at least something that could happen in the way they want, where they get Western support. But this doesn't seem to be going the way World War I went. World War I, someone fired a bullet and then the whole world was killing itself. But now, if the West were going to join, they would have by now. They're just not. And you see all the propaganda is in an effort to get the West to join the war, but it's not happening. And I'm not actually sure why that is. As far as I can tell, they've left Ukraine out to dry. They've encouraged them into this position, and then they've just left them out to hang, I think.
Yeah. So I already mentioned 3 reasons as to why Russia went in. The NATO is by far the most important reason. The fighting between the Russians and the Ukrainians in Donbass, probably the second most important reason. The third and fourth are kind of a toss-up for me, which one's more important than the other. And that is a large part of, like, a small minority of the Nazi-leading Ukrainians, a very small minority, happens to be a large majority of military leaders in Ukraine. And then you have the issue of Crimea. Russia keeps asking for Ukraine to admit that Crimea is now Russia, and they were depriving Crimea of fresh water. But Russia, solved that problem once they invaded. And the fifth reason turns out to be the biolabs is a legit reason. Like, at first I thought it was bullshit, but that turned out to be really legit.
Do you agree with what was in Ukraine on Fire about Crimea being, it wasn't an invasion at all. It was a very Russian population that wanted it, and Russia just walked in, and that was the end of it.
Well, Russia didn't even walk in. Russia walked out of their military base, right? Like, the Russian military was already there. There was enough Russian military in Crimea for the last, forever, basically, that because Russia's had their Navy base there since the 1700s. So
I remember Abby Martin on her show On Russia Today being outraged about it, saying this is completely unacceptable aggression by the Russian regime. I don't care that I'm going to get banned off my show on Russia Today. And so I believed it because that seemed like a risky thing for her to do. But even now, it just seems like bullshit. It seems like that was a complete non-event.
Well, remember, the people working at Russia Today. So here's the misconception of Russia Today. The people working at Russia Today, the American speaking version of Russia Today, the American RT, they're not Russian, right? Some of them are Russian speaking, but a lot of them are Americans. They're people like Max Kaiser. So a lot of the people working at Russia Today, they're working there for a paycheck, right? And they may or may not even agree with what they say, right? It's the same thing. People working for American media might not agree with what they say on TV, right? So a lot of these people have their own opinions, as long as they don't go too far against America. So, for example, if you start speaking out against Biden on CNN, you're going to get fired, right? So if an anchor on English-speaking Russia Today starts speaking out against Russia, they're going to get fired. No different than a CNN anchor speaking out against the Democrats, right? Like, it's the same concept. But a lot of the people working at American Russia Today were American, and they are influenced by American policy. So, and American news on CNN. So she watches CNN all day, and then she goes to her job at Russia Today. And if she believes what CNN has told her, she will just, read the Russian side of it as her job until a point where she completely disagrees with it.
Yeah, I know. It's just so funny that she would have a show on Russia Today that says below it, warning, this is financed by the Russian government, and she's spewing a bunch of anti-Russian propaganda.
Right. Like, CNN should say this is funded by the Democratic Party, right? Like, it's it's no different than that, right? So in the case of Crimea, I mean, it looks bad because technically, Crimea was part of Ukraine, but also technically, before that, Crimea was part of Russia that was given to Ukraine because Russia was never expected to break up in creating Ukraine, right? It's a shorter version of chicken and the egg, right? Like, who owns the land in America, the Native Americans that were there before, or the Americans that moved in.
Things change, man. I mean,
right.
You want to get into Israel and Palestine?
Right, exactly. Borders change. People have this mentality that the border yesterday around the world is going to be the border in 100 years. Borders change weekly.
Of course they do,
right.
But it's massive.
All right, I actually need to get going.
Yeah, well, it's a fun stream. And I'm always trying to think about this stuff on a personal level and how to position myself. I like Latin America, and I can't believe I'm even entertaining the notion that moving to Russia might be something people have to start considering soon, because it's not woke, and that's refreshing.
Oh, I got a great question. Tone, would you rather have a useless Russian passport or a Latvian EU passport? That's an interesting question. So here's the problem. Here's something that you don't know, Nick. If I am to apply for a Latvian EU passport, I would have to surrender all other passports. If I am to get my Russian passport, I get to hold on to another passport. Right now, we're not going to talk about my passport situation, but at the moment, me having a Latvian EU passport only gives me one advantage over a US passport, and that is no global taxation, okay? So would I rather have a Latvian EU passport over an American passport? Probably, right? But I don't know where Latvia is going to be in the future, right? I don't know. Putin could be angry enough to take over Latvia next, right? Here's the thing. I do not see Russia as wanting to take over all of Europe. But the more Russia is demonized and the more Russians die in this conflict, the more they might actually be interested in taking over other countries, right? Because if they take over another country, then that country will not be killing them, right? So this is the geopolitics that people don't realize what could be happening. Now, me adding, pre this conflict, I was actually interested in the Ukrainian passport as well, which I can get. I can get a Ukrainian passport within a few weeks by birthright. I can get my Ukrainian passport. But the Ukrainian passport also forces me to surrender all other passports. And the Ukrainian passport is not a very good passport. A Russian passport prior to February was significantly better passport to have than a Ukrainian passport. Even though the Ukrainian passport can get me into Europe, it's still weaker than a Russian passport. But a Russian passport you can have alongside another passport, whether it's an American, an EU passport, or a passport from a Caribbean nation that gives you similar access to an EU passport other than the United States without the global taxation part. And you can have it alongside Russian. And with the Russian passport, you can go to places like China easier. You can go to other countries that the US passport is very frowned upon, right? So there are benefits to having a Russian passport, less so now because of the conflict. And the conflict that could have been avoided very, very easily. That is the frustrating part. People seem to think that I'm pro-Russia in this conflict. No, I'm angry at this whole conflict for many, many reasons because it could have been avoided. And as this conflict goes on, me being born in Russia, I may have to live in a country where Russians aren't demonized for being born on Russian soil. Even though I've literally been to Russia a total of 2 weeks since the age of 10. All right, I gotta run. I seriously have to run.
All right, man, let's jump off.
All right, I'll peek at the price of Bitcoin. It's going higher. That's great. It still needs to break 44,500. All right, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully I still have some audience into the future, and we will see you guys on the next. I also wanted to mention the Novak Djokovic thing, but I'll cover it next time. He does own does own part of a company in the COVID vaccine, but not in the vaccine. Anyway, we'll talk about it next time. Bye, guys.
See you guys.